What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 in Best Podcast News Award winner and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I am also the host of the only online show in the world for fathers and dads that is sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I am the board chair of the Global Food and Drink Initiative, a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora. I know it's diaspora. I guess I always get that mixed up in my mouth, but that's okay. Diaspora, who are doing it all in food, wine, and travel. We're broadcasting live on May 29th. It is Staggers State of Things with special guest Jill Jones. And you know what? I have to thank Chris and another lady who sent in suggestions for the name change. I did send to Jill and Aisha the first email or communication I got. There is something from Chris also, which I'll forward to them. But if you do have names for our show, we'd like to change it because, as we said, Jill is not a special guest anymore. Would we agree? She is part of the family. So let's bring Aisha and Jill on. And this is actually a special edition tonight because we got a special guest too. So here we go. Jill, you're on mute.
I muted myself because I'm always doing something.
Well, how often does that happen?
I know, not very. Okay. All right, now settle down.
Oh, sorry. Don't want to get on your bad. So easy. How are things, ladies?
Good. Very good.
Yes, and Aisha with her new hair.
I know, you look good.
Yeah, my
looks good on you.
Lightened. This is like my tribute to my brother, the original natural redheads of the family, the two of us. So
this is wild because we got a whole bunch of people already, like it's already blown up. The people are on the conversation, which is amazing. Hello, Jen. Yes, Jen was one of the people that brought in some name suggestions.
Thank you.
And Chris has something I'm going to fall forward to Jill and Aisha after the show. So how's the week been, ladies?
Oh, boy.
Rootin' tootin'.
And Jen's going, love the new look, Aisha.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. The United States has been an interesting place to be.
Well,
yeah, it was really worrisome. You know, it just when you think that, you know, we had a little bit of a clearing with Biden in office, and he's doing it's like there's two different things happening simultaneously at the same time. You got all this incredible movement that he's making and inroads, but then you have Congress and the Republicans. And I mean, literally, it is a civil war. Can we just say it? I mean, it's a civil war that is actually occurring. It may not be the way people got to dress up in their Confederate little digs or whatever they like to reenact. You know, I think that's the problem. Everybody wants to reenact that crazy, ridiculous time, you know, where
you mean when
they're still thinking
when there was slavery, you mean?
Yeah, right. Remember, and they keep wanting to reenact like that Confederate movie with Clint Eastwood where he played a soldier and the little girls poisoned him to death with mushrooms. So, you know, I think Nicole Kidman did it. Yeah,
on with the wind. Okay,
they are very much so. You know, it's just crazy.
With a bunch of happy little pickaninnies singing in the background.
I know. It's so true.
Well, you know what? This is great because we got a lot of people in the audience live. Thank you as always. And this is another first for our conversation because we have our first fan who is actually going to be with us tonight.
It's exciting.
And we always encourage you to come on, but I feel good because this lady is a Canuck. She's from Canada, Christy White. Hey Christy. How you doing?
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hi
girl.
Hey, did you see? Hi, girl. She's already in. It's like family. Yeah. It's like family. So Christy, do share a little bit about yourself to our audience.
So I'm Christy White. I'm an Indigenous children's author who writes a book series mainly geared towards boys and boys literacy. I'm also an Indigenous advocate here in Canada. So I come on and do a lot of education stuff, do a lot of talks, that kind of thing.
It's amazing.
Wonderful.
It
Thank
is.
you. And we've been waiting patiently for you to come on. So I feel that this is going to be a charge. And see, you're getting love already. Chris says, hi, Christy.
Hello.
Kristen's saying, yay, Christy from Canada. So
Yes.
you got the love in is already started. Wonderful.
No, it's fantastic.
Love
Well, we'll see how much love's going to be spewed out of your mouths tonight with some of these conversation topics.
I have no love for
Exactly.
Republicans right now, so let's get going.
Okay. Okay. So first off, speaking about Republicans, they're not passing the January 6th legislation. Is that a surprise?
No.
No. Why would they pass it? It's like, if they pass this legislation, they're only telling on themselves. The thing is, they don't want it passed because they don't want their connections to these insurrectionists to come to light. That's the honest truth. Some of these people who were in the House and in the Senate gave these people tours, told them where the ins and outs were of how to get in, how to attack, what the weaknesses were. These are people who are connected. Let me tell you something. The person that planted those bombs,
Yeah.
they know who this person is. They're not speaking. And so as much as it seems like a no-brainer that this should be something that they should do, they're not going to do it. And when it comes down to brass knuckles, all roads lead to Trump. And that's something that we forgot to put on our list of talking today about Trump. All roads lead to Trump. And that what we're going to find out when this whole criminal prosecution comes forth is that this January 6th insurrection has definite connections to all of his misdeeds. All of these senators, all of these people who refuse to vote on this are all somehow connected.
Yeah, I agree, because it has the story has legs. And, we know that, if we go just by, the poster child for Texas, Governor Abbott, he likes to get rid of stories with legs. He doesn't have any that work himself. But the whole point of it is that the insurrection happened. They're trying to push a new narrative through. And you can see it because there is some, I got to tell you guys, everybody knows that somehow Facebook gave my information. I get a lot of emails from the Republican Party. Hey, friend. Hey, this. So came here.
You, of
Yes.
all people.
They have the most cockamamie newsletters. If you read them, I'd have to be brain dead, actually, to even, I'm like, who do they think I am? I mean, this is crazy. But it's great to be informed about how ridiculously stupid their followers must be, because there's no way I can stomach this garbage. They don't want the January 6th investigation, even though how much did they beat us over the head about Benghazi? I mean, they are there is nothing that they've ever done that's been sincere, even Benghazi. It was all just political theater. And they're going to be the same way. Rejecting this investigation is a testament to how soulless the Republican Party is, how dead the party is, what kind of people, don't even really fundamentally. I got into it with one on Twitter yesterday.
You get
they're like
things with people?
Briefly now. Lately, I don't even really bother. But like the keyboard vigilantes, that's what they do. It's Friday night. People are vaccinated. They're going to dinner, and there's keyboard vigilante Republican John Doe Trump sitting there, getting all real heated up. over something ridiculous, something that they told him in the newsletter to say, something ridiculous. So it's a carnival. It's a carnival. And the craziest thing of all is that Donald Trump is now realizing that none of his people read. And because, he has a blog. And the blog is doing so poorly. He'd be better going out and getting a crate and putting it out on the street and just try to tell it again and let people film it. Because at this point, the numbers are going down, but the belief system of who he is has not. There's still 85% of Republicans that support what the Republicans are doing. The interesting thing is, I'm like 85% of what? Because if I'm continually pouring out a vase of water, when is it 85%? Because there are people running from the Republican Party who are fleeing. So 85% of what was our sum total here that we're dealing with these people. Because, aside from the fact that they're killing themselves by not being vaccinated, that's an issue. It's going to backfire eventually. It will, I don't know when completely, but Donald Trump has ruined our country even more than it ever was. And it'll never, I don't know. We have to be tough.
Christy,
From
go
my
ahead.
standpoint, it's actually interesting how many Trump supporters we have here in Canada.
Right?
Like, it's amazing. It's like, we have to remind them sometimes, you do remember you have no say in anything that goes on, right?
You're Canadian. Yeah.
Yes. You would not believe how much, and every topic tonight I can have an opinion on, because it is just so interesting how much of your guys' politics feed into our everyday lives here in Canada.
Well, what's the psychology of these people? Because I would say they're all sort of white males and then frustrated housewives, white housewives. That's who they are. We have a huge tally of young, middle-aged, like millennials coming down back to maybe some of Gen Z, the top of Gen Z, who are now being impacted. And, we tend to say we have a lot of faith in them, but I think I'm surprised with Canadians, but probably because they're closely linked. The racism and the horrors are equally kind of, they're on the same par. They're still a threatened species. White men in their 20s and 30s and 40s feel like they are victims. It's absolutely outrageous. And you can thank Joe Rogan for that, the comedian who never was, who isn't funny, that decided to be the Pied Piper of hatred and insecurity for chodes of America, chode males.
Well, this is something that I don't understand either, is that you have people who are in power complaining that they don't have power, okay? This makes no sense. These very same people who were trying to take over a government that they basically control. That is the bullshit that made no sense to begin with.
True.
It's like, why are you staging an insurrection? What, because your president lost? So you're basically just a bunch of sore losers. That's what it comes down to. It's like it had nothing to do with anything. And I don't think even a fraction of those people really knew why they were there in the first place. I don't think a fraction of them really knew that they were being used until they got arrested. That's when they're like, oh yeah, I was being used. Now you see it?
No,
the
being used.
They knew they weren't being used. They knew they were part of that ideology. They knew they were part of that movement. And this is the thing about the Republican Party in the United States that bothers me so much right now, is that we don't have a two-party system. We have one party and a cult. And this cult mentality is, you can't even get the leader of the Republican Party in the House to say, this is how we are going to do. This is what we are going to do as Americans. No, this is what we're going to do as Trump sycophants. This is what Trump wants us to do. And that every politician that comes up in the Republican Party from now until whenever, we don't even know when this is going to
I
end,
agree.
feels that they have to pledge allegiance, not to America, but to Donald Trump in order to be a powerful politician on the right, this doesn't even balance the scales in terms of how our political discourse is supposed to be in this country. We're supposed to be able to have a two-party system. Right now, we have one party that is afraid to act because they're afraid to lose power, and that's the Democrats. And then we have one party that doesn't know how to be a party anymore.
But the Democrats are "O ye of little faith," because, I didn't spend the amount of money I did giving to, I've said it before, to different people to go up there and have them just sort of like pussy out on me. I need you. If you can't do the job, then we need other people who can mirror almost not the hatred as much, but mirror the Republican Party on an equal footing and battle them out. Because right now, the difference here is like the Trump people, they're singing Bill Withers songs. Use me. Use me until you use me up. If it feels this good getting used, they feel like they're winning. So in their minds, it's like, how do you compete with that? That's kind of crazy. So we have to come back hard. And the Joe Manchins and the Kristen Sinema and all of these people, they've got to be leveraged. And Joe Biden needs to stop the bullshit with, I want to reach out and give an olive branch. It's never going to happen. I know that media has been talking a lot about that, but to see Officer Sicknick's mother begging for people to give her son, just the respect to investigate his murder, for me and how this came to be, was probably the lowest that this country could ever go. I have never seen. This was like rich people. They're all rich. They should have just kicked her in her freaking teeth. Yeah. Because essentially that's what they did. They actually shit on her. And for me, they will never be able to take that back, because this was an elderly woman herself in frail health or frail. And she's there because her son was murdered by some crazy mental Trump supporter. And they are all crazy. There's not a legitimate Trump supporter in the bunch. There's something pazzo with them, something. It may not be completely pazzo, but it's mostly pazzo. It is like they are short of being like their brains looking like the remnants of an ashtray, because they're dangerous and they are high on power, because the little bit of the no's that the Republicans deny us, who, let's be honest, I was telling my daughter the other day about Republicans. I said, this is just innately who the party is. You have two parties. You have the Democrats, who people are like socialism, blah, blah, blah. Let's take all the titles out of it. You've got a Democratic Party. The party essentially is structured today, not in 1876, which everybody wants to go back and drag that piece of history up, but they don't want to go back and deal with what their ancestors did to the indigenous people and to Black people in this country. But they will cherry exactly.
That was based off of actually, I'm from an Iroquois community, and it was all based off of the Iroquois Confederacy. Yes. Our whole system runs the same way. That's how come I can actually be so interactive in the conversation, even though I'm on the Canadian side.
What do you say? How do we get our power back? Because is it so wrong to want people to have a better life, to live in a better quality? I would rather deal with things like with the Democrats, where they didn't deliver something, as opposed to, but I know the party essentially is a good hearted party. The mission statement of it, the Republican Party, is like, you got to muddle through, pull your bootstraps up, get it together, do it yourself, shoot people while you're getting it. And if you want it, go freaking take it. That's the Republican Party. That's what I said. And now this is what we have. A bunch of freaking degenerate misanthropes, disgusting people that, to be honest, their party was never decent. Ronald Reagan was a piece of shit. And right now, what we're dealing with is that China, hello, everybody, hello, Trump supporters, China and Russia are going to get together, and you all will be sucking their you-know-whats. Not long. Thank you for being assholes.
Even on the Canadian side, it's interesting because we have, as we were talking about these 20-year-old males, we have 20, 30-year-old males when they get into any sort of confrontation, want to start screaming their Fifth Amendment rights.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm like, again, like, and the Trump supporting and just, I can't believe how much it has definitely feeded into even these 20-year-old guys here in Canada who just want to run around and act the exact same way.
It's just, it's rude. They're just, and who's raising them? It's like they have no breeding, but they know that we have been teaching that they know they are not the oppressed party, but they love being the superior ones, and they want to flaunt it, and they want it even more. They want it back. They want it back.
Well, I'm going to say this truth. I don't think you are ready for this, like the audience. I'm honest. Okay. You take a little bit of power from white men, and they go ape shit like Beyonce and Jay-Z.
Yeah.
In that song. And this is the byproduct of having a Black president elected in the United States.
I see that
All of this is a 10-year blowback. This isn't going to end anytime soon. They're never going to let us forget that we elected one Black man as president. And then we had the nerve to elect a Black woman of Indian descent as vice president. Oh, we're going to be paying for this till our grandchildren are in their 80s. Okay.
Yeah.
White people do not forget. They forget when they do stuff. They have that selective memory. Oh, like we didn't do this to Native Americans. We didn't have slavery.
Ancestors never did it.
Don't make me, don't blame me for what my ancestors did. But they will. They don't want you to blame them for what their ancestors did, but they want to be daughters of the Confederacy.
Yes.
Okay. At the same token, these are the same people in our country who are joining this movement of sorts to lead the insurrection of the country. These are the grandchildren of the grand wizards of the KKK.
They are.
These are the great grandchildren of Confederate soldiers. These are the 75 million people in this country who are the racist or the apologists for a racist. And until we can deal with that fact in America, we're going to be stuck with where we are with a Republican Party. Put it this way, the Republican Party is the party of racism, is the party of white supremacy, is the party of hate, is the party of let's get all the guns we can and shoot everybody. They believe in the Second Amendment until Black people start arming themselves.
Exactly. Like when the Black Panthers did it. Now they went crazy.
They had the laws.
Okay, ladies, I'm going to stop you right now because I got a pile of comments. I think Christy may want to get some, but let me get the comments in first. First of all, Kristen saying to her dear friend, she happens to be an incredible mom too.
I believe that. I get that feeling.
Black Beauty saying, I totally agree. Just shook that the Republicans don't seem to realize we all know that they're complicit in 1621.
They don't care.
Kristen says, optics. Chris says, not trying to jump the gun here, but after the sewage spewed this week out of the mouths of Taylor Greene and Bruce Gates, Democrats need to start trying to work with the repugs.
I agree.
Not repugs. They clearly do not want to work with us. And if they are successfully in their midterms next year, all people of color, women, and LGBTQ community, Muslims and Jews are seriously doomed. The repugnity will be on all our necks for a long time.
That's true.
Yeah, we've got to organize.
Well, let me get down here. There's there's things going on. Like Kristen goes here. Yes, they are. Glad to know that you're not fooled by the true north, strong and free. Okay. God, here we go. And God's gift through his word. Thanks for this conversation. Oh, you just nailed it, Jill, Chris says. And he also says they're all being raised by
Jackals.
jackals.
Yes,
They are. I believe
they're
that.
being raised by assholes, is what it is.
Mhm.
Okay, and Christy's saying white privilege is alive and well in North America.
True.
Yeah.
So we are caught up. Anyone else, any more comments on this? On this one?
I think that everybody's trying to get over in this country, and sometimes we sit back and we think, well, how come white people? There's so many reasonable white people who have stood up. They're fighting back. They're trying to take this by the horns. But the difficulty is that then there's a fair amount who always sit on the fence and go, well, they see opportunity. Now, I didn't vote for Trump, but it doesn't stop them from their entitlement to take opportunity when they see it. But, the reality where we are now, if you do not stand up and differentiate yourself from these souls, these different people, and not be counted, then, you're really no better.
Yeah, and my comment is, don't be surprised if some of these people, these insurrectionists that have been arrested, get off because there was no
support
1/6 commission
right.
to investigate. Because these people are basically saying it didn't happen. They were tourists. Their defense are going to use those words, those clips, to help defend them and get them off.
Any final words, Christy, before I move on to the next conversation topic?
Nope, I'm ready.
All right. Okay. Christy is ready. Next up, Texas passes one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the United States. Okay. Christy, you want to start on this one?
Whew, I'll let the girls go first.
Texas is on that BS.
It's Handmaid's Tale, headed right down that road. You're dealing with a situation where they're making abortion illegal after 6 weeks of pregnancy, and many, many women and even young girls, particularly the young women who get in this position, don't even realize that they're pregnant. Yeah. And what's worse about this is there's sort of a hearsay rule that's being considered and allowed in this law, which is if you tell your neighbor that you're pregnant and, let's say I take a trip to California and I have my abortion and I come back and say, oh, I miscarried, I could be reported for that. And I could also be just sort of investigated as to why that miscarriage. They can challenge you on that. Even if you're freaking walking down the stairs and you fall down and you lose your baby, what it does is they're taking personhood to the level of that this baby you're carrying in your womb is a state citizen of Texas. As soon as, you get pregnant or as soon as the egg touches. And there's a big discrepancies on that. This also raises deep concerns for doctors who are delivering babies in a hospital. And typically when there's something like an emergency, they typically try to save the mother's life over the newborn's life. But I don't know how this will impact if they can't make that decision, because those doctors, just even your average doctor in a delivery room, could be held accountable or under investigation as to why you decided to let that pregnancy, you didn't try to save the baby. So we have some serious dilemmas here that they've sort of, started to create by doing this. And there were a lot of protests today in Texas today, a lot of women out there really upset about what's happening, because this is just phase one of their eradication, because other states are seeking to follow.
I might catch hate for saying this, but this law was put together by a bunch of men and a bunch of barren ass women who never even had babies. Let me tell you something. Between the 6th week and the 7th week, span of 7 days, at any point that heartbeat could show up. Okay. Right. You don't know when. And then for some women, after 7 weeks, right. Depends on how it's developing in your uterus. And to say that, at a heartbeat, we're putting this heartbeat date at the 6 weeks.
The heartbeat.
At 6 weeks. So if at 6 weeks, not every woman has a heartbeat at 6 weeks.
It's true.
I know I didn't. Mine didn't show up till almost 8 weeks. The OB I went to is like, oh, you have this little ball thing here. I have no idea what this is.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, And mind you, it was a male doctor. Most male doctors also don't necessarily know what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where the people who are deciding about women's bodies don't even know how women's bodies function. Okay? The men who are making these, they're so pro-life until it's time to save lives. If you're pro-life, then Black lives should matter, but they don't
gun
matter.
control.
Gun
control. Pro-life. I don't think.
And we're going to get to talking about gun control in a minute. But Black lives don't matter to you. However, Black lives don't matter. But these lives of cells matter to you. However, until they're born. Because once they're born, you don't give a crap about those lives after they're born, because then you want to cut all the services and programs to these women who did not want to have these babies. And what's even worse is that they then take it a step further to make women who've been raped, molested, etc., carry babies, carry babies carry trauma babies, right? They don't necessarily want. And again, these are people who do not have to live with the trauma, do not have to live with the care, do not have to live with the responsibility, making these laws about other people's bodies. The party of limited government overextending, overreaching the government to control other people.
Christy?
I have multiple thoughts on this. So one of the things is again, like that, one thing I don't think they've taken into consideration is like suicide rates that are going to go up, especially for young girls put in this position. I mean, we have so much going on with drug addiction and so many things. I'm actually a kinship mom of a little boy whose parents were addicted. And I mean, it's those kinds of things that I look at, and I look at these young moms, especially, and I mean, I have family both on the Canadian and the American side and young girls on both. And I mean, situations don't change no matter where you come from. And I just, my whole thing is, why isn't there just as many consequences for men coming out of a lot of these decisions? Like nobody's holding still fathers accountable in these kind of decisions. That still baffles me. I mean, why is it always just the women? If we're going to be forced into these kinds of decisions, then why is it we're the only one that has to stand there and be held accountable?
Yeah. And if I may just add another thing for me, if this country is supposed to respect our religious freedoms, then I find this bill to be completely going against those things. Maybe I'm not a person who necessarily believes that life begins at that point in my religion, or that I may think that it's a karmic situation that's happening, and that some souls choose this life, this entrance and this exit. If I'm Buddhist, I would feel that this is what the soul decided before it came, that this is what it wants to do. I mean, for me, this borders into, I find it really offensive that the country is driving everybody into Christian principles. And I really don't like that, because first of all, that none of them act like Christians. They act like heathens. And as I said, they keep living in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. For those who, are so want to tout their Christianity, there was a covenant when Jesus came. So what was in the First Testament, if you don't know, you need to just cut that half out and just deal with the last part of the Bible. That's the point. That's what you need to focus on, because that's it. All that happened, you don't really need it. You don't, because Jesus fulfilled that in a prophecy when he came. There was a new covenant. Otherwise, you all should be out there eating locusts for dinner and trying to part the seas and not using stoves and not using AR-15s, because I do not remember seeing Jesus and the disciples with assault weapons walking around in Jerusalem.
Well,
My other thing is too for young pregnancy is like not even just forcing women into these rights, but I don't think they've looked at the strain all the way around on a system and things like that. I know here in Canada, our child welfare system right now, 70% of the children in care are Indigenous children. When you look at those numbers, I mean, why aren't these people putting more time and energy into foster parenting, or, you know, putting supports into place for these mothers instead of spending so much time, money, energy, hate into putting all these stipulations on, you know? I don't think they really looked at what the fallout of this is really going to be either on the other side for the children, for society, everything as a whole.
Can I just interrupt for a quick second? Because I know tonight, if I don't get it in, I'll be reading comment for 15 minutes. So Christian has said, agreed, Jill, it doesn't matter who is in office to do your individual part. That's how change moves. Chris says, oh, this subject, the young woman who had to travel way out of state to get an abortion due to being raped by her own grandfather. That is the story. All these old white men need to stay out of women's choices unless they actually have a uterus. That's what he said. Christian says, don't forget removing them from moms to put them into the foster system.
Yeah.
Black Beauty. These so-called righteous pro-life fakes don't want to promote social service programs for the women who find themselves with an unwanted pregnancy, but yet they care so much for the unborn.
Yeah.
This is the part that kills me with men with this discussion. Is like, just because I let you in here doesn't mean you have a right to say what goes on in here.
Yeah.
It's like, the sad part is that these same people who want to make all these rules about all this are often caught cheating on their wives. They're caught having these down low relationships. They're caught messing with children, Matt Gaetz. They're caught doing all this other kind of stuff, right? But then they want to be the moral high ground of the country. This is bull. It's like, you know, I just think men should not be able to make laws in this country anymore because they screw it all up.
I agree, but some of the women are a little cuckoo birds too. But the fact that they want to occupy our uteruses
levels.
I mean, my uterus isn't really in the running anymore, but the fact that they want to occupy young women's uteruses, like freaking Palestine and Israel, you know, I'm a little bit. We have to stop this because we are headed down not only this road of, we're headed down a very dark evangelical road. And I really feel it violates our religious rights, because we are a country now that is formed of many, many different types of religions and different types of beliefs. And I really feel that unless they eradicate those religions, they have to honor and respect the belief system of that. And they also need to respect science.
Yeah. Well, mine still works, and I'll be damned if I let somebody tell me what to do with it. I'll burn it down first.
One more comment here. Jen is saying it is astounding that we still have to fight for our rights to have over our own bodies. And these people standing protesting in front of Planned Parenthood all the time in my community. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But let's be honest, this is a hot button issue. The reason it won't go away is because it is it tugs at people's hearts. Abortion is not easy for anyone to make that decision. It is difficult. It is, for whatever the reasons are. But the point is, the Republicans, just like they're playing, we said they found a new attitude. I found a new, which is Donald Trump. This was their go-to all the time. Planned Parenthood, babies that are being killed. This worked for them all the way through, because they get donors, they get a lot of funding. And until we get rid of these super PACs, we will never know. And we need to stop it. We need more transparency on these donations coming in to these politicians. They will continue to politicize this. The rest of the world has made their peace with abortion. You don't see everybody going crazy in France or Italy or whatever. And Italy is Roman Catholic. It is something where there's a level, and that's between the person and their God. But the minute you start letting them control your body, but they can't protect my ass from getting shot up working at the fucking Dairy Queen. I mean, give me a break. You have a lot of nerve. And if they were all in front of me in Congress, I can't even explain what I would do to them at this point.
And you know, the other thing too is that, like Jill said, they think this decision is made lightly. They think that people treat abortion like birth control. Oh my God, we're living in a place now where you can get Plan B, and Plan B doesn't even stop you from the egg meeting the sperm. People take it before that even happens.
And sometimes it doesn't work.
And sometimes it doesn't work. But the decision to not carry a pregnancy to term is done with such forethought. It's painful. It's difficult. It's stressful. And you don't do it because you think that, oh, yeah, I want to go out and party all the time. You do it because you think it is the best decision at that time in your life. And it's a hard decision. And you still live with it beyond the time that you do it.
I mean, I had a miscarriage. So, and many, many women I know have I've
too.
had several. Okay. They all go in. And this is another thing about this really weird law, because afterwards they call it like a DNC type of thing. We're dealing with people that aren't even scientific, but apparently my pregnancy was where I was at 16 weeks and the baby just started to break up and disintegrate. Now, I could have kept that baby inside of me until I rotted. Okay. That's what. So we have a big decision here down in somewhere like Texas. Would I have been stuck like a mummy carrying a 16-week-old baby rotting in my body? Or were they not allowed to go in and clean that out? Because that's exactly what, and the pain. Nobody wants to go through this. I am telling you, it is like pain that, you know, it actually makes delivery pale in comparison, because it's trauma. It's the body trying to protect itself. It's all of these things with probably, you know, you've got a natural delivery. Everything is moving in this very holistic movement. But when something is dying inside of you and it is painful, it's brutal. And if they would leave me there. So that's another thing about this, what they've come up with. And it's cruel. It's a cruel law.
You know what scares me about this law is that I had a miscarriage before I had Amaya. And when I was first pregnant with her, before the 7 weeks, before they felt the heartbeat, I started bleeding. And my doctor told me that I was miscarrying.
Yeah.
So imagine that happening with this law in place. And to know now that I actually had a viable pregnancy, but a doctor told me this pregnancy is not going to happen. And I spent an entire weekend just bleeding and just terror of, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And then Monday morning for the doctor, a male doctor, to be like, oh, your HCH levels are fine. Oh, you're good. And I was just like, are you kidding me? You left me a whole weekend in trauma.
Right.
This is what that law does to women. It leaves them in trauma. It's not, women need to be making these laws, and then you need to not have crazy women like Marjorie Taylor Greene included in making these laws. The people that need to be making these laws and advocating for these laws are the people who are truly affected by them.
And they also don't want sex education in schools, and they don't want to provide any kind of, that's the other thing. These are people who think that what we are dealing with Trump and his stupid people who, mind you, many girls have had abortions with Donald Trump, but that's a whole other story. But that they don't want to teach it in schools. So what do you do with that? What do you actually do when they don't even want the boys to know what to do? This is a group of people who believe in QAnonymous. Yeah. These are white people. There are white people who have taught their children that black people have tails. Do you understand? I have two friends. I think I talked about this once before. Their fathers told their daughters, black people have tails. And ironically, both of those white girls ended up married to black men, which is wild. So this is what we have. They want total control over women's bodies, and I mean, uneducated.
Well, it goes back to
let me just interrupt for Christy. Do you want to get any, because these two can go all night.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I agree. I agree completely with what they're saying. Like the trauma state, especially, I mean, and I'm thinking when you start getting into younger girls, we're looking at what's going on in society now. The ages for girls getting pregnant is younger and younger. I can't even imagine the trauma that this is going to leave them in.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, we had a president for 4 years who was known for hitting strippers raw. Okay. And this man is the lead on this issue of abortion.
Right.
Come the freak on. Oh my God.
I know.
He should be the number one proponent of, Roe v. Wade. It's like, dude, you don't like wrapping it up. So
yeah.
All right,
ladies. I sounded like old dirty bastard for a moment.
It's all right. It's
okay. Considering everybody can find a little piece of chewing gum wrapper to give to him. I mean, the fact that he still refuses is crazy.
But STDs were his Vietnam, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, we go here. So Chris is saying he was laughing on Aisha. He was bringing it in. He also says this show is on fire tonight. Love it. He also says women should never go through things like this.
Yeah.
It's true. All right. And folks, we're not even halfway through topics yet. We're not even halfway through topics yet. So here we go. Now, unfortunately, we're going to have some unfortunate things that we're going to have to share about. First thing up here, the unthinkable discovery in Canada as remains of 215 children found buried near a residential school. Christy, I want you to lead on this one.
Well, to start with, I don't know if everyone can see my shirt. It does say All Children Matter. And that's a huge campaign across Canada for just highlighting to stuff for residential schools. Actually, one thing that was brought today we were really pushing is down in the States too. You guys have a lot of residential schools too. So what had happened is they have found a mass grave on the property of one of the residential schools. Now, I mean, that's in Kamloops, BC. I'm in London, Ontario, and I'm from a reserve that's about 25 minutes outside of the city here. And there's 3 reserves there. And to give you an example, there's a residential school there. We have petitioned time and time again to get the grounds checked there. Canadian government has covered this up left, right, and center. This was their one huge, dirty little secret they didn't want out. And in the last 24 hours, it just went poof. And I mean, Trudeau he's Trudeau. So, of course, he's standing with us in harmony. So every Indigenous community is shook right across Canada right now. The crazy thing is it's been emotional. Even on our younger ones, because when people think of residential schools, especially in Canada, they want to, tell us to get over it. And, it was 100 years ago. Well, to give everybody an example, if y'all hold on to your seats, last residential school here in Canada closed in 1996.
Oh, wow. Wow. What does a residential school compose? How did they come to be?
So they were ran by the Catholic Church to assimilate Indigenous children to become good little white Christian Catholic children. So they were literally stolen. They had what they called the Indian agent, and they had legal right to come and take Indigenous children from their families to these schools. And this is only one school of tons all across Canada and the US. So the more and more they start checking the grounds around these places, the more and more Indigenous mass graves they're going to find.
Wow.
Yeah, mine is Chris's state is extremely complicit in the assimilation schools of Indigenous people. It's like all of Connecticut. Everything in Connecticut is Native American. Like you go from the names of the cities to the lakes. But that is something that I've heard of here happening.
Yeah.
Does this go a little bit along with remember they found a bunch of nuns who had been at a school or somewhere and they found all these mass graves of infants and babies?
Yeah.
Is this all part of the same?
It's the same genocide.
Oh.
Are these children, are they suspecting that these were children who were abused in this assimilation school?
I read
and murdered?
The thing is I have family members. I mean, my grandparents went to residential school. I have aunts and uncles that went to residential schools. We have older cousins that went to residential school.
Oh my God.
When you think about it, the last residential school to assimilate the Indian child here in Canada closed in 1996. My first child was born in 1996.
What power do the Indigenous people in Canada have with this situation?
We don't have any. That was the thing is a lot of people aren't aware of what in Canada is called the Indian Act. And that was an act that was laid down by the Queen and the King and actually was British rule. Yes. So it's very, 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 it's really deep history in Canada. Canada has tried to cover it up left, right, and center. And then through the States too, there's lots of, they've come on board too to really start highlighting what has happened with Indigenous peoples all over, because it's still genocide happening today. As I said, like just looking at foster care system here in Canada, 70% of children who are in care are Indigenous. Well, we're only 4% of the population in Canada.
Why is that?
It's become, again, so you have to think, most of these generations went to those residential schools. Mm-hmm. So when they came out of those schools and started becoming parents, right away, their children were even taken off until residential schools were closed. Then what started happening is then they started treating Indigenous people. Indigenous people in Canada are treated like scum of the scum of the scum. Like we are bottom run here for being the original people. Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Jesus.
Actually, funny enough, the reason why I hop on your guys' show is because we are actually one of the most censored demographic of people in Canada who do not have a platform. So I jumped on your guys's because, even here in Canada, we have like Black History Month, which is fantastic. Right. We have Indigenous Day.
And that's it. Mm-hmm. With all the contributions that have been made.
Absolutely.
From the Native American.
Yeah, like in our country, we have a month, but you guys have a day in Canada.
Yeah. And actually, for the longest time, it was Columbus Day, and we had to fight to even get that back. I mean, on that side. So.
Yeah, we're fighting that now.
Which they're fighting to keep it, you know. It's but do you feel that the representation in the Indigenous, is there unity amongst the tribes with the Indigenous people? So there's unity.
There is, but the problem is it's a great unity, but it's a great unity of like just despair, I hate to say. Yeah. All of our communities, like to give an example, as I said, my community is only 25 minutes outside of a major city center. We don't have clean drinking water. Right. I mean, that's happening on most Indigenous reserves. Babies are getting sick due to mercury poisoning. If you look up Indigenous stuff in Canada at all, like it's horrific how the Canadian government has deemed standards for Indigenous people to live. And as I said, they deem those standards. They don't give clean water. They don't do those things, but then they will send the authorities in to take your children because you can't supply adequate things like clean water and, clean clothing without water. And so it's this whole system fail. So what we've had to do is, yes, we're very communal, and yes, we're beautiful ceremonial people and holding each other up. But again, at the end of the day, like, when these kind of things come out, and it's straight across Canada right now, it's hit the news outlets. And I mean, we've seen Canada lower their flags here to half mast for many, many things. We've had to scream at politicians today to lower their flags to half mast.
Exactly.
Please respect those Indigenous families. When we think of the number of children, then you start thinking of the number of family lines they killed off. Because
right.
those
Are they going
children
to be
never
able
had
to
a
collect
chance.
the DNA? Are they going to be
Yeah.
able to collect this DNA? Because with Ancestry.com, will we be able to capture some of their generations of that exist and complete some of the stories that they were told that went missing? I mean, it's a long investigation.
And
Well, and the
repatriation
crazy
is so
thing
important.
is, the government wanted to document that there was only 50 children's death that happened at that school. So why is there so many in that grave if there is only 50 children that died ever in the whole history of that school? What is
No,
that
and there's-
grave?
I have
Yeah.
a question for you. How does the Indian Act that you have in Canada differ from the Indian Act in the United States?
I would have to say, because the agreement I know you have to excuse me because I don't know exactly how it differentiates. I know on this side, it's an agreement that started here actually with the British Crown. That's
Okay.
what our agreement is.
Ours
So
was
I
a
think that's
separate
how
law.
it's different.
Yeah.
But that's why we have treaty rights over here trying to protect like our water sources, our forestry, all of that, because we have most of the natural resources. We own most of them, but the Canadian government doesn't want to hold up to the treaties.
Of course they
And exactly. So when it came to the Indian Act, what it was originally assimilation to our men. They started targeting Indigenous men.
Yes.
If Indigenous men got, certain careers or education, they would, what we is called enfranchised. They became British citizens. And you were supposed to be so thankful for this.
Right.
Because you become the white person and you have privilege,
Right.
and you then now can own land and those kinds of things. But it stripped you from your community. It stripped you from a billion other things. Just like when a bunch of our Indigenous soldiers went over and fought in the wars, they didn't realize when they come back, the Canadian government would enfranchise them. They lost their status.
Oh, Jesus.
At one time, in the way of women, here you go, women. Canadian law, one time under the Indian Act, if an Indigenous woman married a white man, she was enfranchised, she became white. But if an Indigenous man married a white woman, guess what happened?
She became
She held status.
Interesting.
Do you I have one question. How is the recognition process of tribes in Canada compared to the one that we have here? Because we do have a recognition process for different tribes, groups, entities, etc. They rank them actually, essentially. I only know this from my work at the Commission for Minority Affairs in South Carolina, and one of my very good friends was the Native American Affairs coordinator. How do they have that same kind of process in Canada where they do the federal tribes, regular state tribes, and then
okay, so on Canada, what you're talking about your guys' roll system.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have a roll system here because it's actually all federal level. Federal holds all. And that's where we get into this thing of provincial stuff. It's almost like over there with the states, the different states and that kind of thing. So here, we always have like provincial governments pointing finger at federal when it comes to Indigenous stuff. Federal government pointing fingers back. Of course, nobody wants to take responsibility. The federal government definitely does not want to take responsibility. So what it is when we had the Indian Act, the agreement with the Crown, like pigs, dogs, and everything else over here that had certain breed lines, we were numbered by bloodline. And you are numbered under the Indian Act and given a number, and it's only till a certain bloodline, and then you are no longer Indigenous over here.
Oh God.
Okay, let me just stop because the comments have just been flying here, and I know Jill Jones a little bit. I can see such a look of disgust on her face. Like if she was on this side of a border full time, she'd be okay. That's another conversation. But let me catch up with comments because Many are coming in. Christian is saying colonialism in Canada meant trying to wipe out the Indigenous people of this country. Real Django goes, this is nuts. Christian again goes, it is highly likely that there are graves like this throughout Canada.
Oh, for
A
sure.
great many of these children are undocumented students of Indian schools as young as 3 years old. She also says, immigrants to Canada have more rights and benefits than Indigenous people of this country.
Whoa.
Chris
That's
says,
true.
this is so horrific. These innocent children, God bless their souls. Unreal, so sad. Kristen again comes. We have more Indigenous and Black children in our foster care system now than there were in residential schools.
Really?
Yes.
Yes. Well, Black Beauty saying, well, so much for me think I would come to live in Canada. If God forbid the Republican anarchists take over America. Wow.
Yeah.
And then Kristen again, the particular school was actually the largest one in Canada.
Yes.
So
let me continue.
Let
Let me just finish up. Inhumane and criminal, she says. Kristen's on fire. She should be on the conversation. Even if the indigenous people get their government status by blood quantum.
Wow.
Chris saying, so federal government holds the cards. Great. Ugh. And Chris says, bingo. And Jen says, so very sad. Catholic school of any kind is something I have a real funny issue with. From my experience with nuns and the regular teachers were beyond awful, way beyond. It's astonishing, really.
Yeah.
All right, we're caught up with comments.
What's astonishing to me is that, just on a spiritual level, why are we here? Because everything is sort of moving and all the Pandora's boxes are opening for everybody's dirty little secrets. And that has to account for something, just on a spiritual vibe. I think that whatever we can do to help each other beyond the borders, it's like looking at whatever happens with the Palestinians or whatever is looking like here in Canada, all of these things, everybody's dirty secrets are exposed. And it's really hard to put that Jack in the Box back in the Jack in the Box, because then you now see all of your government and the government leaders for the fraudulent people that they are, for the fraud that they've been perpetrating. And this is why there is such disbelief and people don't believe in the government. But I'm going to tell you something else. There's some new times are coming, because Canada better snap to it on this. Yeah. This is something that if there's anything you can tell us what we can all do to help this situation along, please do.
The main thing is education. The other project that I want to come on and talk to you girls about that's going on over here in Canada is the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women project, which is all over the United States, but here in Canada. But here in Canada, we have one specific highway. I have family members who were last seen in police custody. One of the shows I jumped into with you guys just in the comments was the Floyd one. And that's because if you even just Google Deborah Christian in London, Ontario, I mean, that's a city here. My cousin was killed in police custody. London City police officer who is still flying a desk. We don't get the national coverage. We don't get the conversations.
No, you don't.
On this side, if you look up murdered and missing Indigenous women, the police over here are a huge part of it, especially RCMP. We don't talk about
law
it.
Enforcement here too. They
Absolutely.
think that it's a law enforcement serial killer.
Actually, TV1 was covering missing Black and Indigenous women on their network. That's something I remember. I want to ask you a question, though. I want you to clarify this for people who don't really necessarily understand this about Indigenous people. The assumption is always that these tribes have... I live in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Except for the Mohegan and the Mashantucket Pequot.
Yeah.
Who are very wealthy tribes.
Yeah.
Because of the casinos.
Yes.
That 99% of Indigenous communities are not wealthy from federal funds living on federal lands. Just make that very plain and very
I will make it
obvious for people who know.
I will explain on both sides so everybody understands American and Canadian side, because it's actually two different things. Yeah. So on the American side, The reservations down there that have money. So I can speak of one that's more of a home reserve to me, which is Seneca Nation. They have the big casino. That, again, like you're saying, I can 100% guarantee if you do your homework, if you do your Google Map searching, everybody's so into technology. If you look up reserves that do not have government-run casinos, and as much as they think the people are running them, they are not.
Oh,
Yeah, that's another thing.
yes.
So just like in every community, the politicians, everybody wants to talk about lining their pockets. We
Right.
have them everywhere too. It's
Yeah.
called chief and counsel for some places.
Yeah.
That is a federal position. That is a dictatorial position. So they want you to believe that Indigenous people and their lands have a lot of money. They
Right.
do not.
No, they don't.
So unless, yes, there are some that are doing better than others, because they do have a casino there, but not every reserve has a casino.
Right.
On the Canadian side, there is maybe 3 casino reserves across Canada.
Right.
Whoa.
So that puts it into a very different perspective when you're looking at, I mean, because if you looked at reserves here and reserves there, they look very different. But you guys, same with your reserves there. I mean, as much as everybody believes that there's this free pot of money coming out of somewhere, there isn't. Our rights that everybody thinks that Indigenous people get over everybody else comes with a consequence. The consequence is we are the lowest of the low. We will be treated that way no matter what.
Right.
I mean, the consequences to my children are the racial slurs they've had to hear,
Right.
the way they've seen their mother be treated,
Right.
the confrontation with police. That's the payout they get for very basic stuff, like especially because a lot of people say, especially in Canada, that Indigenous people in Canada get a free ride because we have
Right.
healthcare.
That's social health care.
But isn't
right.
that everybody else in the country?
Right, but it's
Not
funny. If you're on social assistance over here,
yeah.
you get the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same with education fund for Indigenous people over here. That actually came, there was a trust fund that was left by the Queen Mother to the Canadian government to take care of Indigenous people.
And how
They
did they
used
not
it for the
enforce
stimulus
that?
package over here years ago.
But
They
you know
used
what?
it.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Because then the Queen and her little flunkies
Yep.
should have made sure that that got distributed properly. There's no excuse for that. And
Absolutely.
Elizabeth should have been better. She should have done better.
And that's
All
why,
right.
as much as everybody is very big on the Queen, Indigenous people, not so much.
No, I don't blame you.
I'm going to stop right here because we're going to go to another conversation now, but this is going to be continuous.
We can have this a whole show on this.
Yeah, I think, you know what? I think that's a good idea. We're going to have just a whole show on this. Let me just catch up with comments. David saying Canada needs to heal its soul by starting to do right by Indigenous people. Kristen again, Trudeau's been promising to snap too before he was elected. Some of us hopeful and hoodwinked. Chris is saying,
Damn.
wow, quite a eye-opening and education evening. Thank you, Christy. Kristen again, Jill, if you'd like to learn more, search for a phenomenal woman named Cindy Blackstock.
Yes. I will. I definitely will.
And
She's a human rights
Desmond Williams.
She has taken the federal government in Canada to court numerous times for Indigenous children. The Indigenous children have won 13 times against the federal government over here with the help of Cindy Blackstock.
Okay.
Oh, I will look her up.
Desmond is great. Tell Aisha, I love Dr. Winbush. He's a great man. Warrior method.
Yes, he is. Oh my God, my
right.
favorite professor when I was at Fisk University.
I interviewed him a number of years
Don't
ago.
you love him?
He's amazing.
Oh
Amazing.
my God. He
And Christian
actually chaired
saying,
my thesis, my master's thesis.
Christian said, I used to love the Royals. No more.
Yeah, it's too much. I mean, the thing with the takeaway for all this what's going on is I wake up every day and just go, what's wrong with white Northern American people? What is it? And I know it's all over the world, but white people, what is it?
All right.
I mean, how do you break that chain? Maybe we're looking at it in such a bizarre way. Maybe
Sell
what
your soul to
planet?
be white?
I don't know. I mean, there's just something really wrong with them.
Okay, so Christian's saying, full disclosure, I'm a white woman. I am a child welfare worker. I did not learn of any of this in my education.
I know. I totally get you, Kristen.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's just, where does this, how do you correct this measure?
Yeah.
This has been going on for generations. We are, it's so funny because Saturn is in Aquarius and we're moving into the time of Aquarius. And I truly believe that we are hitting it. We're going to be battling like this for at least another 12 years on trying to impose a change, because it takes 12 years for this thing to move. And people who don't believe in astrology, it's fine, but there's too many correlations that are kind of putting the nut to the bolt on this.
That's Williams saying, what is wrong with white North America? There's no reward for telling the truth on this planet.
No.
T. Stevens, thank you, Christy. You're very informative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Christy saying, Christy, you're living your purpose. So proud.
Yeah, I'm actually very thankful for the time that I spent working at the Commission for Minority Affairs and getting to know the Native American population, particularly in South Carolina, and spending the time on the reservations and learning the different ways in which Native Americans are being disenfranchised in the United States.
It's the same with,
it's the same with Black Americans being disenfranchised, but learning the ins and outs of how the government was working. Like, that's why I asked that question about people thinking that Native Americans are automatically wealthy because of, the federal tribes, some of the federal tribes getting money for certain things. But like you mentioned, the part without missing the water, just.
Kristen says, and I used to hate Mercury retrograde. LOL. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one. Wow. And again, I guess we do need to just have one episode just on this topic, because obviously the interest not only from our panelists but our viewers is very high on this. And Christy, thank you for bringing it to the forefront of the importance of this.
Well, June is Indigenous Awareness Month in Canada, so
okay, so we got you. We're going to have you back on in June for sure.
Absolutely.
You're welcome anytime. At any time. No problem. Speaking about crazy things going on in America, we go back now south of the border. Disgruntled worker who killed 9 appeared to target victims. So another mass shooting in America. Who wants to start off with this one?
The day before this happened, I was telling Dr. Vibe that I do some social media for an organization, a left-leaning organization. And the day before this happened, I was doing a series of social media posts for them about gun violence, about gun reform, and things of that nature. And those posts were due to be released on Thursday, not knowing this was going to happen. So when this happened, I was stunned. I was like, oh my God, I just wrote about this. And this is, first of all, it's a product of 2 things. One, this is what happens when, as Americans, we obviously cannot be around other Americans. We need to be quarantined, because notice that under quarantine,
we need
to be permanently quarantined from each other, because notice under quarantine, the number of mass shootings, even though there were some, weren't in number as they are when we're allowed to just be free. Yeah. We need to not be free, okay, to do these things, because we're stupid people. But this is that. But other than that, this is also the product of having this impotent party and a party that refuses to stand on its feet and demand some things change in this country. We're not going to do gun control. People stand there and say, oh, but my Second Amendment rights. But here's the thing about your Second Amendment. There are 2 words in that Second Amendment that actually require us to have gun control and gun reform and gun laws. Well regulated. We have no regulations as it stands now. None whatsoever. And so people just buy their guns and go on and shoot and do whatever. And then you have Texas. Texas needs to be its own country in and of itself, because they have this law now where people don't need to have a permit or anything to get a gun. Just buy a gun and shoot it off at anybody. Yeah. Okay. Black people, Latin Americans, Native Americans in Texas, you all better hide, arm yourself.
And they have a stand your ground, and they have stand your ground laws, which means you could just turn around and say, I felt threatened.
Exactly.
Well, it scares me more because they still have on the books that you can hunt indigenous people down there.
Wow, do they?
Oh, they still have
just like our lynchings. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really wild. I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. No.
Well, and it's crazy even for me, because in Canada, we actually have like gun laws, a lot of them.
Right.
Like, so a lot of this, it looks even crazier from our end. It's like, what are you thinking?
Build a border wall. Now.
We've never been made. We've never. They don't want to make people of color feel comfortable anymore. This is what this is all about. They don't want Indigenous people to feel like they ever had a place. And and like, well, you lost. You don't have it anymore. It's not yours. And they don't want Black people. Don't get too comfortable. You know what? Because we don't get rid of you.
Panther Party.
Yeah. But this is what this is all about. This is the motivation. And it's a form of bullying and intimidation. I mean, but the saddest part of all is we have a child who was killed in the car with his mother from a random rage driver. And they've been showing this car all over. And, you know, the money keeps going up for the reward. And, you know, there's a part of me that goes, somebody knows this Volkswagen, this white Volkswagen, but their asses are sitting there waiting for the reward money to go up, because this country is going to pay its karma. Trust me. And it's going to pay for it when Russia and China get together, because ain't nobody checking for us anymore. It's like, ain't nobody checking for you, boo. Y'all keep your little fucked up nation and the fucked up North America. That's what's happening. Meanwhile, everybody's so busy trying to keep this shit rolling and going. And Republican after deadbeat Republican is going in and turning tricks now on it. They might as well just freaking fuck in the Congress and have girls trolling through, do whatever you fucking want, because nobody would give a damn. They might as well, because
Congress is a strip club right now.
Trump set the standard when he said I could kill somebody on Fifth Avenue, and what he knows and has done to the indigenous tribes. Yeah. Oh my God, he's the sickest piece of shit that ever was born. And I'm going into an area, because the question here is, we knew what Hitler did. The big question is, what has Trump done?
Yeah.
What has this bitch done to have so much allegiance? What has this bitch been doing his whole fucking life? Because I'm telling you all, he sold his soul, and he's inhabited by something very dark. It's very dark, and it's very evil.
The thing that bothers me every time I see one of these is, remember where I live, everybody. I live in Connecticut. Chris lives in Connecticut. I live 35 minutes away from where babies were killed in their classrooms.
Oh yeah, Sandy Hook.
And we haven't done a thing.
No.
So if we didn't do anything to protect babies, we're not going to do anything to protect adults.
No. No. Not at all.
We're not going to do anything. Why? Because there's too much money to be made.
But if we actually stormed that Congress, we would be under the jail. If Democrats were out there, we would be dead. They would have shot us all up.
Have you guys seen Standing Rock?
Yes, and Standing Rock, I did see this. And, you know, and it always comes back around, and they don't give a shit about, but they about had kittens when that tribe in Arizona showed up to vote. I couldn't believe how rude everybody was. Well, that's not legitimate. They're not allowed to. They were, people here, it's like, I don't know whether to bitch slap people every day or just ignore them. I just don't know what to do on the streets anymore.
Well, and we cheered them on because In Canada, Indigenous people didn't even have a right to vote till 1960.
Jesus.
By hook or by crook, they're going to take away all your rights, but they're going to make sure that theirs are emboldened. And that's, like I said before, well regulated.
Yeah.
Well
Militia.
regulated militia. Militia can be an outside word, but regulated is the key word
Exactly.
that they are not focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Regulated is in the Constitution. These people who call themselves constitutionalists and like, oh, I believe in my Second Amendment rights and blah, blah, blah. Well, regulated is in that amendment. It's there. It is right there. So we need to have the laws. But y'all go on.
Chris,
Mhm.
Chris says if the Republicans didn't do a damn thing after what happened here in Newtown, they will never do anything. I went through
Sure.
Newtown last week. The pervasive sadness there will never go away.
That's true.
Kristen says so many restrictions here, the gun activity and the freedoms for everyday citizens to carry a weapon on their person. Even going to the grocery store, cannot wrap my mind around that reality.
No.
I saw a picture of a guy at Barnes and Noble with an AK-15, an AR rifle. I'm like, really? You need a gun to read?
Kristen saying 45, king of domino effect.
Absolutely.
Desmond, there is no reason the reason there are no massive efforts to manage gun control is because America is rooted in violence.
Yeah, it doesn't know how to be decent.
The country was founded on violence, of the taking of land from people, and then the bringing of people to own,
Right.
as as property, and then just the continuous violence after violence. This country's whole history. That's why when we get to talking about CRT, it's going to be interesting because all of it is violence, but people want the fairy tale.
All right.
Yeah.
Jill, you are better off ignoring them on the streets. You never know who might be packing.
Hell, Jill might be
It's
packing.
true.
Desmond Williams says American psychology is inherently believed that death is a natural part of the advancement of society. Ooh, interesting.
Huh. Wait, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
American psychology is inherently believed that death is a natural part of the advancement of society. So Desmond, if you could elaborate on that comment, that'd be great.
I kind of disagree, maybe at one point, but then we wouldn't have this counterintuitive side of immortality and trying to be young and stay. What is that? I mean, that's an old myth. That's a myth. I don't believe that, but I could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm not disagreeing, but I don't know if that's what the vibe is. I think it's more like they have nothing else to live for.
Yeah.
Well,
but on the other hand, our children don't believe in their own mortality either. They think that they can shoot somebody and that person's going to get up and be okay.
Like a game.
Get a message, like it's a game. So on the one hand, I can see where that comment's coming from, but on the other hand, we also in this country believe in immortality.
Well,
the movie Aliens did it for us.
T. Stevens says, well said, Jill. We all know what Kingdom 45 belongs to.
Yeah, we do.
So let's move on to the next conversation topic. What is critical race theory, and why do Republicans want to ban it in schools?
Aisha. I'd like an answer to the first part of the question. What is it?
Right.
Okay. Critical race theory, it's a legal term, first of all, but it is the teaching and understanding that at the premise of certain things that race has a place in terms of how certain groups in society have been treated in their experience of life in this society impacts everything, and that it is at the root of how some of our institutions behave, some of our laws are created, and things like that. It's not a layman's term. What the white people that take this term and our Republicans think it means blame whitey, which is not what the term means at all. It's looking at history through a lens whereby people of color experience life through systems that have been designed to oppress. Exactly. And that
So I guess a lot like systemic racism, like we're doing a lot around that here, and
exactly.
intergenerational trauma and oppression.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that critical race theory is how all of those things are connected to the laws that are then shaped. It's that these things become law, that laws then become part, that the oppression and all of that then become law in our countries. And the fact that people don't want it to be taught, they don't even know what the hell it is. First of all, when they start talking about it, they think, like I said, it means blame whitey for everything. If you feel that way, that is your own guilt speaking. That's your own guilt because you know you've mistreated people and you've benefited because of your privilege. They don't want to be reminded, one, that that white privilege does exist. They also, like Joy Reid did this spectacular thing on Thursday where she's talking about Tulsa, and she said that, people just want, these are people who just want the fairy tale version where there's the white savior at the end. They may have created the situation, but then they fixed it. So they want you to remember that they fixed it. It's like a white person saying, well, yes, we created slavery, but guess what? We passed the laws to end it. But you created it in the first place.
Right.
Okay, so these are the things that they want to remove.
I mean, did they? We can't even get John Lewis's bill passed.
Exactly.
And we can't get the anti-lynching.
For example,
and Christie, they can't get rid of their laws. So it seems like, if anybody should believe that there's a cabal of people monopolizing and creating this oppression for us, we should be the ones actually thinking on those terms.
Exactly, but they do not
these hillbilly rednecks.
Right. But for example, it's the same reason they don't like movies and films where there's not a white savior, Black films where there's not a white savior.
I blame Hollywood a lot for that. I really do.
Don't end up being, the white hats and coming in and saving all the people that they oppressed. And
Hollywood needs to clean its act up. Half of the movies that they've written are bullshit, and most of the people playing the parts suck, and they're irrelevant at this point. And I keep telling you all, post-celebrity, it is going to turn into a world like that very, very soon.
And I would actually just like more representation of us in film industry.
Yeah.
Behind the camera.
Well, it's so important because we have to think about who are those Native actors, actresses that had to change their names, and they were always cast as they were from Siam or they were from Asia, and they played a bunch of different places. There's also, just to break open those stereotypes that exist, the drunken Indian. My grandfather was Cherokee, and okay. He had a little bit of issues with white spirits and stuff. I've said it before, but
we get a whole lot of Cherokee princesses.
Yes, so it's important. So we have some amazing women in politics here. The Apache, I think that she's there. I can't think of her name, but she's pretty fierce. But the problem is that with critical race theory, it's like changing around that whole Thanksgiving crap they taught us. Okay. Because we need to know everybody's sitting down feasting, over a murder, massacre. But that's sick. The horror for me to think like, oh my God, can we just call it, we're thankful for our friends, as opposed to, Pocahontas came along and said, hey, John, well, oh my God.
Even just that, Pocahontas is the most earliest depiction of female Indigenous human trafficking.
She is.
It really is. That whole story is the first ever story of female Indigenous human trafficking, and they just ran it off to Disney, put it out there, and I mean, it broke our hearts when we had little girls wanting to run around as Pocahontas at Halloween. not
I
understanding.
know. I think I did,
But-
and I wanted her hair. I was like,
Yeah.
I want my hair like Pocahontas.
Exactly.
You know,
My many,
because I didn't have straight hair.
my many Twitter
I
fights,
don't either.
look, my many Twitter fights aside, what scares people, white people, the most about critical race theory is Jill. People that look like Jill, Black
Yeah.
people that look like Jill that can pass
Yeah.
if they wanted to. They
Yeah.
don't want that. That scares them more than anything. Having a country that has a large mixed population,
They don't want it.
what they used to call
Well,
miscegenation.
where that came
scares
from,
them more
though,
than anything.
we scared them with that is because when we were able to start getting off reserves and going to work lines, what the guys would do is because no one would hire anyone with an Indigenous name, they just start name grabbing. That's why my
Right.
last name ended up White. It was like
Oh,
some
which I was
guy in
going to
line heard
ask.
some Smith White and, oh, I'm, Doug White now, right? So that's what happened
Yeah.
is Indigenous people, what we used to do is we used to send the ones that could pass
Wow,
as light
yeah.
skinned, and we'd send them out into their community. And that's what they're afraid of again, is for us to get that even footing again.
Yeah,
The
and then
one drop
this is-
rule, they can't resist it.
And
Yeah.
look, I was listening.
We had
to this thing,
octoroons and some of the other runes,
quadroons,
you know,
and
quadroons,
the
octoroons.
16th, 30.
Yeah, I mean, can you
32nd.
imagine that? I've never even split a recipe or, down to what? 1/100th.
Well, did you know
They
that there was a
did.
law in this country that you could change your race from white to Black, but you couldn't change it from whatever other minority to white? There was a case in Louisiana where this woman who lived her whole life as a white woman found out that she had a Black ancestor, like far down, and the law said that she had to become a Black woman, and so she fought it. But they told her that once you change your race from white to this, you can't change it back.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
in like the 80s, early 90s. And so that is something in this country that just critical race theory is going to have people really questioning everything that they thought they knew, teaching the history that they didn't know, teaching the things that teaching the real history of this country. Whereas this country is not necessarily something to always be proud of,
But-
the country's history, that we've had some really jacked up history. This country's done some really messed up things, but they think that's the antithesis of patriotism.
Well,
And
it
that-
also would help for just culturally to know things. A lot of times we accuse people of cultural appropriation on certain things, not understanding that they did cornrows. Indigenous people braided their hair like that ages ago, or we did different things. We in people from South India have fried chicken, or Koreans. It's like there's got to be more that we focus on, that we are more similar than our differences. I think that's just what it is. It's like if I go to my friend and there's like, the masala that I have at a Indian restaurant is as hot as going to have that yellow Jamaican chili pepper dishes. There's so many, we are more similar. And if we kind of focus on those tentacles, and I do think that all of our races, the people of color, want to do that. It's the white people that are the most resistant, and they want to control how we do it, and they want to speak on the narrative. Most of the people in advertising, get this, are white. And their excuse when I was working in it was that they would go to the colleges and they couldn't find anybody who wanted to participate in these, meetings and schedules to educate people. They didn't want to. But who really helped to bring something? Spike Lee, him doing advertising, even for the little bit, and having his company was so incredibly important. But then you get cock blocked, and the brands don't want to go. I'm not going to go with a Black thing, but they only do when it becomes cultural, and they start calling people the acculturated Indigenous person, the acculturated African American, the acculturated Asian, the everything in what I was acculturated was the word. No, but they specifically had on certain documents for a bank that I cannot name was these are acculturated. Rather, y'all ain't gonna be fucking with them regular. You know what I mean? But we ain't got the riffraff, but we want the acculturated ones who drive a Subaru and who, have 2.5 kids, could be divorced, single mom. She's a low-level, mid-level executive.
The white people dipped in chocolate.
But this is the problem and then there are different media groups that got formed for people of color, where they've amassed a group of us, but we are not playing in the big leagues of the advertising agencies, the JWTs, the DDBs, that we are not at the Ogilvies, and we aren't at the helm, where decision-making isn't only about race just because you're a person of color. Sometimes you can just see things one way or the other. It's not always about race. I actually find when people think that we're race baiting, I think they are.
Yeah.
Because I could look at something as right, wrong is wrong. It has nothing to do with whether you're black, white, or brown. They almost can't do that. It's always rooted in racism or their biases that they've been raised with. Sorry.
A conversation this week we've had is like how I was feeling like I just started Kickstarter because I'm translating my children's books into Indigenous language. And then someone said, well, why do you have to do a Kickstarter? That's great. And I said, because I'm an Indigenous female.
Right.
And they looked at me and I said, because that's a crazy thing. I will never, ever, ever, no matter how much blood, sweat, tears, and everything I pour into these books, this project myself, I'll never get to be Christy White, the children's author. Ever.
Yeah,
I will forever in my lifetime be Christy White, the Indigenous children's author. So I have to, again, like you were saying, I don't get the perks of being like Robert Munch. My book is just as popular, but I have to do a Kickstarter to get anybody to come and look at my stuff. Yet he can do whatever because he is a white male. He just over here in Canada took all of his books, 30 of them, and switched them over to Indigenous language.
The one that kills me here is Ezra Keats. Ezra Keats gets away with Black children's books.
And a crazy thing for me is I have a Kickstarter to put these books in Indigenous language, and here I'm the Indigenous author. And my artist is an African female.
Wow. Interesting.
And we have to do a Kickstarter.
Because no one will give you the money to do it.
No.
Because we have, I mean, and that's what I mean.
You're women, and you're women of color, and you're in a man's world, and publishing, and all of that. I'm telling you, the system is crumbling because we are worming our way in, and we have to just, get you more help.
But the crazy thing is that's what I mean. We shouldn't have to. None of us, no person of color should have to continually be put in these boxes. Why can't someone like me just be Christy White, the children's author?
No, but every time
just be that?
Because I think about our people who made inroads with their protests and their fight. And every day that I wake up where I feel really weak, that they're pushing back on us, I imagine them killing our people all over again and dragging their bodies, dragging Mr. Byrd on the back of the truck. Those things should not be left unsaid, unspoken, because when James Byrd was driven on the back of a truck, that was the day America and every Black person here should have went, wait, whoa, because that was a message, and we know who sent it.
Yeah. And like Chrissy, I work in publishing.
And more followed. More followed very soon. They had already started forming, and they had the guts to go out. And then with the Indigenous missing women, these are people targeting people. And for everybody who says like, oh, it's got to be somebody with a mental problem. Well, then here's the deal. Americans have mental problems.
Racism
racism is not a mental illness, but the way you've raised your kids and your generations and had your films and all of it, it is karmically related, and there will be hell to pay.
You saw that on Twitter
somewhere.
The person that tried to tell me that the racist lady was mentally ill. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No. She was a racist.
It's
But
hate
Chris-
in your heart.
Yeah, but
for
Christy,
people.
I work in publishing. I'll tell you this: I had an easier time getting a book contract for a white male author than I did for a Black female author that I'm working with right now. It's so much harder getting something for her. And let me tell you, the subject is the same.
And that's
Well, and that's the
because
thing. I have to do, like, I'm going self-publishing, and I mean, there's reasoning why, because again, as just being an Indigenous children's author, that's the way we have to go. And that's what I mean. We don't get those big perks. We don't get to live those grand lives. We don't get to, but yet, they never have to take into consideration how every policy and everything affects our lives in more ways than just the average person.
And that's a monopoly that needs to be busted up completely.
Yeah,
publishers, all of it, because,
Yeah.
you know, it's like people were like, Jill, why don't you write a book about Prince and blah, blah, blah. Well, I would self-publish because nobody's interested. In the day and age that we're living in, I'd have to come out and say, well, I used to have a booger in my nose problem. But then this week, hey, I'm releasing a new song. Oh, now I've decided I'm going to be a lesbian. Women are now positioning themselves with problems in order to get attention. We have to physically come out and say, oh, I had a toenail issue. And, you know, or now I've decided that it is unfreaking real how many women have to pander by playing victim on some level. I have no problem if we have problems and we legitimately, but does it have to always be presented by a PR agent saying she wrote this book, Indigenous woman, her whole family was slaughtered back in such and such time?
I know.
This is so bad because
Always.
let me tell you something. As a literary agent, I know this. Jill could write a book about herself, her life. I could pitch it as someone who went from Motown to Uptown. Okay,
but that's
would not be able to get a publisher.
You wouldn't.
Jill, if I said Jill wrote about all her sexual experiences,
please, there it is.
And even more so, like, you have to think, I'm writing children's books for Indigenous children and mainly towards boys.
Which they are like, we don't want them to be educated. And what does this mean? You know, this is a sick world we're in, and there's so many layers and things happening right before our eyes. And we really have to pay attention, because the minute you criticize something, oh, you're anti something, oh, you're anti-trans. Now I'm like, no, let's just cut the shit. Can I just hear a song on the radio or something new from somebody without knowing that she got her period a couple of days and she suffers from endometriosis? I don't, there are places for that, and there are people, but do we have to present ourselves with these barnacles of issues? I want to see you, but then we have to watch them rise above it, because as Desmond said about, I get what you're saying, Desmond, with the mortality. We want to also see people rise above the problem. And it's manipulated. We're being so manipulated. When they stop casting white people to play natives or Indigenous people, that would be great. Or when we see laws actually change for the better. But the scariest part of all is we have people that don't want good for any of us. Yeah. They don't like us. They don't like us. They hate us.
This whole conversation, critical race theory. This is what critical race theory and the discussion is about, and this is what they're trying to stop us from having. From having. They specifically do not want people of color, like the three of us, to get together and have this conversation. Because once that happens, we get together, and our numbers collectively outweigh theirs.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing is for Indigenous people, one symbol that everybody could look up is Indigenous medicine wheel symbol. And when you look at that medicine wheel, I mean, it has every color in there: red, white, black, and yellow. And that's because as an Indigenous people, we believe all races have to come together at some point and work in some sort of harmony side by side, not overtaking each other, not putting one above the other. It's all on level footing. It's all shoulder to shoulder. And until we can get there, which I'm thinking is not going to be in my lifetime, but, I can hope.
Same for me.
Well, and I mean, Jill, I'm
might
not
be
very
okay.
optimistic.
I mean, the hardest part for me is understanding with indigenous tribes and different people is the amount of education and knowledge that is going overlooked or buried,
Yes.
because we're also dealing with major pharmaceutical companies and agricultural companies that came and destroyed crops and medicines. We still see remnants and pieces of how some people were able to cure themselves of the coronavirus, of COVID, in the Amazon with just their little herbs that they use, specific. These are shamans. These are women, things that are passed down because, as I've always said, the original shamans were women sort of enlightened in some tribes. There were women who held that power and that vision. And I just find that the most spiritual things we have of our groups, they try to kill and eradicate. So what side of the world are they on, good or evil?
I want to hold it right there because it's time to catch up on comments.
Oh, sorry.
All right. There we go. So Desmond says, when you study Eurocentric psychology and history, its advancement into a structured society was based on war, destruction, and the pillaging of other tribes.
Individualism versus the community. Yeah,
that makes sense.
He also says there has never been a reconciliation of the loss of life. It parallels the treatment of people of color across the planet. Yeah. Kristen says, unpacking white privilege in its infancy.
Wow.
Is in its infancy, yeah.
It's infancy. Aisha, yes. The Joy read the other night. And also Desmond, yes. Aisha, the white guy in Black Panther.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the entire Blind Side film.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
The fairy tale.
Okay. Kristen saying we need to stop hiding behind history and using that to absolve ourselves of what remains today in the foundations and systems of everyday life in the Western world.
So true.
She also says, could you imagine telling a white person they need to change or shorten their name to make it easier for someone else?
Right.
Or because it won't fit in the government form or data system? Absurd.
Right.
I try to do it every chance I get.
Okay. Kristen says we have a lot of unlearning to do. She also says,
very true.
Christy puts her heart and soul in her literacy work, and then to have to worry and scramble and fight for funding and publishing, is absurd. There is no good reason for it, not one.
No.
She says also, yes, Aisha, because ego gets in the way and rules. And beautifully said, Christy, shoulder to shoulder, the real heart of inclusion.
Yes.
And Chris says, such a great informative evening here. Lucky charms for all of us.
Right.
All right. Let's move on to the next conversation topic. We've got the anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre 100 years ago.
It's on the 31st of May.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't know if everyone's familiar with Black Wall Street, where, African Americans were doing very well during the early 1920s or early 1900s, and they were self-sufficient. It was a area in Greenwood, Tulsa area, and the Ku Klux Klan had enough of it basically and went and burned down all the houses and burned people alive in their homes. They lynched men and women and shot them and killed them and took over that land. And we had a little lady testify this week. She was 102, wasn't she, or something?
107.
From Greenwood. 107 from Greenwood.
She was 7 years old when
and
that happened.
That's another spiritual thing for me. The fact that she lived to tell, that was a very important testimony about what she saw and the smell of burning bodies and all of that happened to her. That's just the universe and Mother Earth kind of saying, I saw too. These secrets are not going to stay quiet. There are people who lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who have grown up for years that did not know about this area, that there were people who today would be probably the equivalent of a Rockefeller, because some had been sitting on land that had oil. These people, the Ku Klux Klan, eradicated them, got rid of them.
And let me say this, it wasn't just because the Klan hated that they were wealthy. They hated that too, but it was a white woman who claimed that she was raped by a black man that started it. As with the other racially based riots of the same in this country, like Rosewood, which is very similar to the Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing. And John Singleton made a movie about Rosewood. And some of these other places, Memphis and all these other places, they always started with this same lie.
But yet again,
later they were lies.
Yeah, like they said, only 36 were killed in this massacre, but historians have put it as high as like 300 people.
Yeah.
And that about 10,000 people were left homeless from this situation. It was built on what was formerly an Indian territory, a native territory. And then that community grew and flourished. They had their own banks, they had their own doctors, it was a cultural mecca. And so basically that was, I believe that the woman was put up to it probably to get in there. You start seeing black people driving better cars than they were. That's a problem. These were people elegantly dressed. The styles, you should look at some pictures. It's quite astounding. So this May 31st is going to be that anniversary. And this is Memorial Day weekend for America as well, which, I still find it so wild that this is who this nation is, but it is who this nation is. So this little sanctimonious put together they're going to do on May 31st. The fact is, nobody thinks about the soldiers who gave their lives, and they just prove that they don't give a shit about people who serve this country by what they just did with the Capitol on January 6th. So they can all go screw themselves and choke on their barbecue this weekend because it's a joke. They don't care. They don't care. White people don't care. Not all of them, but a good majority, especially the Republicans, don't care. And they're frauds. And if you have any of them in your life, you should actually just stop being friends with them, because I have.
I think about Tulsa. And
it doesn't pay.
It reminds me of this.
The planter's wart of society.
When I think about Tulsa, it reminds me of this community in Mississippi called Mound Bayou, which was basically a very similar kind of community. And it had its own fire department, its own banks, its own hotels. It had the first swimming pool in the state of Mississippi for Black people. It had a hospital. This is where Martin Luther King used to go in Mississippi and stay when he would come to the state. This is where Emmett Till's mother went and stayed when she came to testify, because it was very protected. It was a Black community protected. On one side, you had the Klan. On the other side, you had the Klan. In the middle, you had Mound Bayou. And when I went to visit Mound Bayou in 2007, it was really a shell of what it had been, because poverty had fallen on bad times. Integration came and also stripped that community, pulled everything out of that community. And when I walked through and looked at it, and it really looked like it was stuck in time in like the 50s and 60s when I walked through there. Actually, Daniel Hamer died at the hospital there in Mound Bayou.
Right.
And so I went there, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is like what Rosewood, what Tulsa must look like at that time for those people, because the buildings are still erected. They're just impoverished now. But during its flourish, when it was flourishing and people were doing well, you had a Black middle class that, people never expected. You had Black doctors who had gone to like Meharry Medical School and, all of these, Black professionals. You had a Black mortician and
it was a full,
fully
churches,
town. And to know that people, and it wasn't just that they came in with guns and barrels open, they came in with planes, dropping bombs on the buildings and the people. Yeah. And not only that, but there's video archives of this that have never been shown. And I'm looking forward to some of these movies that are coming out on Monday and Tuesday that are going to show this actual archive footage, because We need to see this history.
I just hope that there are people, that people actually start paying attention to these things, because, there's just too much going on here,
But if they take critical race theory out of education, they remove the Tulsa race massacre.
Well, all the more
from the
reason for
history.
people to talk, because people don't even show up to their damn classes at school anyway. Their kids are being learning crazy stuff online. So we need to have better campaigns on how to hijack that situation too. Because ain't nobody, you know what I'm saying? It's like, we don't need your school to tell the story to our youth. And we need to arm our children with the truth so that they go out there and they spread it to the little white kids who aren't getting the truth.
Let me just jump in here. Kristen's saying 107 for a reason.
Viola is what
Viola
Chris
says,
said.
thank God Viola Fletcher was around to testify. God bless her.
Bless her heart.
Christian says, if you are willing, please check out the Buxton settlement here in Ontario, Canada, and the curators Shannon and Brian Prince. Our area is rich in Black history and instrumental in the time of the Underground Railroad. For reference, we are about an hour over the border from Detroit, Michigan.
Interesting. Yeah.
About that, we have Uncle Tom's Cabin. Actually not too far from my community. So actually there's Indigenous community there called Walpole Island. And Tecumseh is from there. So we've actually, there's been a lot of people trying to do the research and what the correlation between Uncle Tom's Cabin is, because it literally pops up in an area that would have been completely indigenous.
So interesting. I remember Vanity had relatives up from Canada.
Yes.
And she was over, and, it was very interesting. And that whole little region in there was always so special to really all of us. Just always had a good vibes about it.
Chris says it is truly awful what still goes on in this country in the year 2021 in terms of racism. I may not see any serious change in my life, but I hope and pray that future generations do.
I agree, Chris.
And Christy
we can't even pass the George Floyd Act. That's what.
Excellent. Christy says excellent recommendations. So we have reached. Again, I don't know if we should end off on this, but I guess we put it on. We have our cockroach.
I know. The worst person of this week.
Let's step on her.
Okay, here is the cockroach. Marjorie Taylor Greene likens COVID rules to Nazi treatment of Jews.
Yes.
Wear a damn mask, Marjorie. I mean, it's not going to kill you. It's not like people told you can't vote or there's Jim Crow laws. It's not a Jim Crow law. It's not, like being sent to she likens it to being sent to the gas chamber. It's like, get a grip.
What happened? Is intellectualism dead? And I mean, does no one want to it's just crazy to me. The worst part of this, what it brought out of people, this was crazy to see that they're selling Jewish stars about not being vaccinated in the shape of a Jewish star.
The trauma porn. Oh,
and
my
says,
God.
I'm not vaccinated. And they're wearing it. I think it's somewhere here in America or wherever this place, the woman had it with just emboldened with, being a real degenerate of society. And they're proud of it. They're degenerates. Like I said, if that was my mama, we wouldn't be talking.
Okay? Wear a swastika and say, I'm not vaccinated.
Yeah, but for America
for
America to continue to not even have something enforceable hate speech laws, there's ways to get around the Constitution with some of this stuff. There's ways to really, all these damn lawyers up there in Congress, and not one of them can figure out how to craft a policy or a bill together on how to have the gun laws, to have hate speech laws like Europe has done. But everybody's socialist in another part of the world. Let me tell you something. Ain't nobody checking for you, America, in other parts of the world. They ain't checking. They are not checking. And when tourism goes down and they're moaning because they can't work a job anymore, working at I used to be a stewardess or flight attendant, or I used to we used to get a lot of tourism. I'm telling you, there will be residual fallout because every European that I know is like, I'm not coming there unless I absolutely have to do some work. There is nothing that I want to see that belongs to America. Nothing.
I hate to say this, but the most beautiful thing I saw on the internet, aside from what I sent you to earlier, was the lady who would try to get on the airplane with no mask, and then she tried to do a runaround around the police officer.
Foolish.
And he body slammed her, and then she said, "I'm a woman in a dress. Did you see what he did to me?" And the guy said, "Boo hoo."
But awesome. I mean, and it's fitting. I think that a lot of people, younger people in a different age group, are also starting to feel that they don't want to keep supporting the oppression. So even by visiting, and in their own small way, I think Clarissa Pinkola Estes had this, I don't remember the full quote, but it's like, you do your part every day to mend a little bit of this earth. Just a little bit. It's something like that. And so some people are like, yeah, do I really need to go to America if I have to work? Fine. Do I really need to invest all this? Because another thing is, they don't want to get shot and killed. It's like, and everybody, we shoved the Muslims down everybody's throat. Like, oh my God, I used to come back from Europe and people were like, how do you deal with those Muslims? I was like, I lived in London as well too. You're not asking me about the IRA. And when I was living there during the time in the 80s when, garbage cans were blowing up. I mean, you're not checking me for that. But, this just is where it's rooted. And I'm still ignorant about certain things historically. And I do not make I don't bullshit about that. But one interesting thing I love about myself is my curiosity. And I want to learn and I want to experience, I'm that person that a friend of mine sent me a towel. This is a short story. A towel. It's a Uchino towel. It's beautiful. It's so soft. And I was like, this can't be real. This is a bath towel. It's so nice. Thank you. Wow. And she called. She goes, did you like the towel? Have you used it? And I was like, no, I gotta be clean to use this towel. She's like, it's a bath towel. I said, no, I have to make a special experience with this towel. I have to do a soak, an onsen with my Japanese, herbs and all this stuff. I have to have this beautiful experience with this because it's so special. I want everybody. And I feel that way for my friends. I want them to have beautiful experiences. I would love for them to go places and see things and not be afraid. Is that too much to ask for? Do I have to be? I think the worst thing you could do would make me be a Republican. I mean, I'm like, I want people to have beautiful experiences. So that's how I'll leave my thing for it. And I will fight for people to be treated fairly. And, I'm not trying to be like, oh, I've got a really nice towel or I'm driving a such and such. Like once when Prince and I were sitting in a Rolls Royce that he bought, somebody advised him to, or suggested because he had money. I remembered like going, I feel like this is our mom and dad's car. It doesn't feel like your car. Or, and I thought it was a little weird car and kind of he did too, actually. This is the thing. But even so, I want everybody to have the opportunity to be treated so much better than we're doing. I hear about all these Indigenous children and everybody should be outraged.
Yeah.
But we got to each do a little bit every day to mend the world, whatever, something
You
good.
know what I want from this experience? I want Marjorie Taylor Greene to have consented to have a blood transfusion and to have had that transfusion and to wake up and for someone to say it was a Black Jew.
Let me come in with comments right now. Okay. Christy, Marcus, going back to our previous topic, I heard that Tulsa riots started over a Black man stepping on a white woman's foot in an elevator. Then Kristen says about Marjorie, oh my goodness. Christian also says, cannot give energy to that. Wow. Then Chris goes, oh, her, that one, the tired old white racist heifer. She needs to be out of conference. But bye. Kristen goes, when Jill laughs, you know it's really good. When she just goes to the side and puts her hand to the mouth, you know it's serious. Kristen says, funny you say that. I taught abroad and the language barrier was very high. We had to rely on eye contact and gestures. For example, at the market, the people of that country would figure out we were Canadian or American. And if you were American, no eye contact, no attempt for communication.
That's if they were New Yorkers. You don't do that.
Dr. Tachi, welcome, Dr. Tachi. When are you coming on with the ladies again? Jen Meyer says, audacity is at an all-time high. Many are misusing it nowadays.
So.
Kristen says, this was such a vibrant and honest discussion. We thank you and thank you for another rich experience because of you, Christy White.
Yay, yes.
And saying
good
such great
here.
Discussions this evening. And we Aisha's back. Come on, Aisha. We lost you for a second. There we go. She's back. All right.
It's the
ladies. We're done. Believe it or not.
We covered a lot of terrain today.
Sure did.
This was a marathon.
Yes.
This was a marathon, but well worth it. And yes, Christy, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Chris is saying, as always, thank you all for a really nice evening. All the best to you.
Thank you, Chris. I like that picture, Chris. That's a nice picture.
Yes, it is a good shot of him. So, ladies, before we as Dr. Tachi say, exit stage left. Sorry to use your ending partner, Dr. Tachi. I hope you gave me permission to do that. What we're going to do is just say thank you and also let you give your contact information if you so be it. So first off, our special guest tonight, Christy. Oh, I removed her. I had her.
Oh, no.
And here she is. How can people reach you?
I'm on Facebook under Christy White. That's probably the easiest right now because most of my social media is switching over. The other place you can find me is The Adventures of Jane Gizmo on Facebook. It's my children's book series page.
Oh, that's amazing.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Oh, and the other place you could reach me is I'm the Indigenous coordinator at Voice of Men 360. So you could always get hold of me there too.
Yes, that's how we first met. Absolutely. And we've got Jill Jones. How can people reach you?
I'm at Jill D. Jones at Twitter. That seems to be the
hot
place
spot
to reach me. Yeah.
All right. Next up, Aisha K. Staggers.
You can reach me at Aisha K. Staggers on Twitter or AK Staggers at Instagram, where I have some pictures of some of my brother's artwork that I paid tribute to who passed away last week.
Beautiful.
Our condolences on the loss of your brother. It is Dr. Vibe here, and what a epic conversation tonight. Christy, you're more than welcome to come back anytime.
I will be back.
Thank you. Good to have you tonight. So I'm Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of epic conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. The best place to get a hold of me is at my website, thedrvibeshow.com. Before we leave, gotta say thank you to a whole pile of people tonight. This was, I think we've had I don't know if we've had as much engagement as we've had tonight. So let's do the roll call. Jen, Chris, Christian, they were like leading the tribe tonight. We also have Black Beauty, as always. We had Real Django. Thank you so much. Real Django, thank you so much for retweeting the replays to your community. That is huge. Thank you so much. Dr. Tachi, Desmond Williams, T. Stevens. I don't think if I forgot you, it's my head, not my heart. And Kristen is saying, epic indeed. Absolutely. And Dr. Tachi is saying to Aisha, her condolences. And Christian Bradfield, remember Christian saying The Adventures of Jay and Gizmo. Okay. Good stuff. That is the book of Christie's. All right. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions. Aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Again, it's Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, 2020 Beds Podcast Award winner, Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. Once a month hosts an online conversation, the only one in the world for dads and fathers, that is sponsored by Dove Men Care and Dad Central. And I am the Global Food and Drink Initiative board chair, which is a non-for-profit organization that spotlights Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, wine, and travel. I'd like to say thank you, everybody, for watching or listening live, and also watching on the replay or listening on the replay. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. And finally, love, faith, and respect. And finally, remember to give yourselves grace. We will hope to have all three of these ladies back again next week, but we'll be back next week. God bless. Peace and well. Keep the faith. Walk good. Spread love, everybody. Good night.